Hello, everyone. Welcome to our pre-review class for corporation law, or the revised Corporation Code of the Philippines, or Republic Act number 11232. So, for this video, we will discuss the basic concepts of a corporation. And for the later topics or chapters, we will have a separate video for them. So let's start with the definition of a corporation. So ano nga ba itong corporation? It is an artificial being created by operation of law. So unahin natin, ano bang ibig sabihin nitong artificial being? Alam nyo, sa batas, may dalawang klase ng being or person. We have a natural person and a juridical or artificial person. So ano itong mga natural person? Ito yung mga tao, gaya mo, gaya ko. So we are natural persons. Yung juridical naman or artificial persons, ito yung mga hindi sila tao but because of the law, they exist na para silang tao na meron silang rights and obligations, no? Kaya ang tawag sa kanila artificial being. So, yan, artificial being. Now, saka lang sila nagiging artificial being kapag created sila by operation of law. So kung yung mga corporation, kapag hindi mo yan ni-register sa Securities and Exchange Commission, hindi sila magkakaroon ng life, no? Ng being. So kailangan registered sila para ma-create sila ng batas, no? Mag-exist sila as an artificial being. Unlike partnerships, etong mga corporation, meron silang right of succession. Like, di ba sa mga partnership, kapag may mamatay na partner, automatically the partnership is dissolved, di ba? But here in corporation, hindi nade-dissolve automatically yung corporation at hindi isa sa mga grounds for the dissolution of the corporation yung death ng stockholder or member of the corporation. Kasi isa sa mga attributes ng corporation is it has the right of succession. So natatransmit lang yung right, no, from one person to another. And meron siyang powers. We have those expressly authorized by law or express powers or incidental to its existence or what we call as the theory of special or limited capacity. So let's proceed to the next slide. So ito yung perpetual succession. Let's erase na. Okay, so ito yung sinasabi ko kanina na meron siyang right of succession. Okay? It continues to exist even if there is a change in those who compose it. No? Like death of a shareholder or transfer of his shares will not affect the continued existence of the corporation. And yung theory of special or limited capacities, no? The corporation, meron siyang limited lang yung capacity niya. Meron siyang power, pero in accordance lang kung ano yung nakalagay sa batas, yun yung express power, tsaka yung mga implied to its existence and incidental to its existence. Okay? Now, let us distinguish corporation and partnership. So, if you can still remember, partnership is created by mere agreement. So, it follows the general rule on contracts, no? That contracts are perfected by mere consent. On the other hand, yung corporation, nag-i-exist lang siya from the time of the issuance of the Certificate of Registration of the Securities of Exchange Commission or in proper cases, passage of special law. So, may dalawang paraan para ma-create yung corporation. May issue yung Certificate of Registration by the Securities of Exchange Commission or kung yung Congress magpasa siya ng batas creating a corporation. Okay? So meaning to say, yung corporation, nag-exist ito by law, by operation of law. And in partnership, at least 2 persons may form a partnership, 'di ba? Kasi yung definition natin ng partnership, 2 or more persons agree to contribute money, property, or industry to a common fund, 'di ba? With the purpose of dividing the profits among themselves. 'Di ba? Yun yung definition natin. So meaning to say, at least 2 persons can form a partnership. So just like in life, no, you cannot have a partner kung ikaw lang yung mag-isa. So solo yung tawag natin doon, hindi partnership. But in corporation, dahil sa bagong batas natin ngayon, pwede na kahit isang person lang, no, ang gumawa ng partnership. Okay? So only 1 person lang, pwede na siyang gumawa ng partnership. Now let's proceed to the next slide. Subject only to what may be agreed upon by the parties, no? So dahil yung partnership, it is a form of contract, no, na it follows the general rule on contracts. So subject siya sa lahat ng kung ano yung agreed or agreement ng partners. But here in the corporation, so meaning to say, kapag agreement, the partners can decide anything, no? It has wide powers, no, for as long as the partners agree to it. But for corporation, sabi natin, we have this theory of special or limited capacity dahil yung power ng corporation, restricted lang siya kung ano yung nakalagay sa batas at kung ano yung incidental lang sa mga powers niya. Sa corporation, meron tayong tinatawag na primary purpose at secondary purpose sa Articles of Incorporation. Nakalagay dun sa primary purpose kung ano talaga yung main reason kung bakit na-create or na-organize yung corporation. So meaning to say, kung ano yung nakalagay sa primary purpose, yun lang din yung scope ng powers ng corporation. Like for example, isa kang corporation para sa school. If you are an educational corporation. So nakalagay dun sa main purpose mo na for educational purpose. So meaning to say, limited lang doon. At saka incidental or implied lang doon sa educational purposes. Hindi ka pwedeng mag-engage into any other transactions that are beyond those stated in your articles of incorporation. Kasi nga, restricted yung power ng corporation. In partnership, there is mutual agency in partnership and each general partner can represent and bind the partnership. So, ano itong mutual agency sa partnership? It means that kailangan it is founded upon parang ano yun, mutual agency kasi sabi natin kanina na based siya on agreement lang, depende lang sa agreement ng mga partners, no? So each partner can actually an agent. So pwede siyang mag-perform ng action in behalf of the partnership kasi each partner is an agent of the partnership. So that is what we mean by mutual agency. Pero meron tayong rule sa partnership na kapag nag-assign sila ng manager, ng person who will decide for everybody, then yung manager na yun ang magde-decide. But if walang manager sila, then each partner can represent and bind the partnership. Now, with respect to corporation, the stockholders are not agents of the corporation in the absence of express authority. Dahil sa corporation, meron tayong tinatawag na board of directors, and they are the ones that manages that manage the corporation. So yung mga stockholder, hindi sila makakagawa ng actions, no, in behalf of the corporation unless na lang merong authority from the board of directors. In the partnership, interest in the partnership cannot be transferred without the consent of other partners. Ano kasi ito, matawag tayo dito, kasi sa partnership, meron tayong principle na tinatawag na Doctrine of Delectus Personae, meaning hindi ka pwedeng magpapasok ng ibang tao sa partnership without the consent of the other partners. Kasi very restricted yung membership ng partnership na hindi ka pwedeng mag-transfer din ng rights mo tsaka ng share mo sa partnership without the consent of the others. Kasi any changes in the relationship of the partners will automatically dissolve the partnership. Kaya wala tayong right of succession in partnership. But in corporation, corporate shares are freely transferable without the consent of other stockholders unless there is a stipulation. Kasi nga, meron tayong separate kasi yung personality no ng corporation. Sa corporation kasi merong transmission of rights no, unlike sa partnership. So pwede mong ibenta yung share mo sa corporation. Okay, partners may be liable beyond their investment kasi ito yung limited liability rule na unlimited liability rule na kapag kulang yung pera ng partnership, yung mga partners, they can be personally liable sa liability ng partnership. Unlike for corporations, we follow the limited liability rule, meaning kung merong utang yung corporation na yung magbabayad. Hindi siya mag-extend doon sa mga stockholders or members. Meaning to say, yung mga stockholders or members, yung liability nila, yung share nila sa liability ng corporation is up to their capital investment only. So hindi na sila kukuha sa personal savings or sa personal money ng mga stockholders. Yan yung magandang attribute ng corporation kasi separate yung personality ng mga stockholder sa corporation. So hindi pwedeng yung utang ng stockholder, corporation yung magbabayad. Hindi pwedeng ganun. Hindi din pwedeng yung corporation may utang, babayaran personally ng stockholder kasi nga meron tayong separate juridical personality. Okay? And ito yung isa sa mga attribute ng corporation na isang kaibahan din niya sa partnership na walang right of succession yung partnership no kapag may death. But dito sa corporation walang nakalagay pero meron siyang right of succession even upon death no of a stockholder or member. So hindi na de-dissolve yung corporation. Now let's go to the doctrines or principles no in corporation. We have this concession theory. This means that a corporation is an artificial being, invisible, intangible, and existing only in contemplation of law. It owes its existence from the sovereign power. Kasi kapag hindi ka na-create through registration or through a law, then wala kang existence as a corporation. Kaya it owes its existence from the sovereign power. It is a creature without any existence until it has received the imprimatur of the state acting according to law. Unlike partnership, di ba, na hindi kailangan i-register yung partnership to be valid, to exist. Pwedeng mag-agree lang yung partners na, sige, gawa tayo ng partnership. Then, meron ng partnership. We also have another theory, the Concession theory, which means that a corporation is the reality of the group as a social and legal entity, independent of state recognition and concession. So, ito yung opposite ng concession theory. Kasi sa concession theory, hindi daw, parang may utang na loob daw yung corporation from the sovereign power. Hindi siya mag-i-exist kung walang grant ng law. But in Concession theory, sabi dito, nag-i-exist daw siya independent of state recognition and concession. But here, in the Philippine setting, we follow this concession theory. Types of franchise, we have corporate or general franchise and special or secondary franchise. Itong corporate or general franchise, ito yung franchise mo para mag-exist ka as a corporation, as an artificial being, para magkaroon ka ng buhay as a corporation. So, ang nagbibigay ng franchise ng corporations is yung Securities and Exchange Commission. So, sila yung nagbibigay ng general franchise para mag-exist ka as corporation. Itong special naman or secondary franchise, ito yung franchise para maka-acquire ka ng certain rights and privileges. Like for example, no, yung mga schools, yung mga educational corporations. So, para magkaroon sila ng existence as an artificial being, i-register nila yung kanilang corporation sa SEC. Bibigyan sila ng general franchise. Pero hindi yun enough para mag-operate sila as an educational institution. Kailangan kumuha sila ng special or secondary franchise from the proper government office para maka-operate sila as an educational institution. So in this case, sa Department of Education or sa Commission on Higher Education. So kuha sila doon ng secondary or special franchise. Another example is yung mga hospitals. So yung mga hospitals, corporation din yan sila, no? Para maging corporation sila, kukuha sila ng corporate or general franchise from the Securities and Exchange Commission para may exist sila sa corporation. Pero para maka-operate sila sa hospital, hindi enough yung existence lang. Kailangan kumuha sila ng special or secondary franchise sa Department of Health para maka-operate sila as a hospital. So yan yung kaibahan ng corporate or general franchise at special or secondary franchise. Rules regarding corporations created by special law. The creation or establishment of private corporations through special laws is prohibited except GOCCs. So bawal mag-create ng private corporations through special laws, no? GOCCs lang yung pwedeng ma-create ng law. So let's proceed. Now let's talk about doctrine of separate juridical personality. So I've mentioned earlier, no, about separate juridical personality, yung in relation to the limited liability rule. Diba, remember na yung mga corporation, dahil separate yung personality ng corporation sa mga stockholders, yung utang ng corporation, hindi pwedeng bayaran personally ng mga stockholders or members. This, on the other hand, yung mga utang na personal ng mga members or stockholders, hindi pwedeng bayaran yan ng corporation because of the doctrine of separate juridical personality. So, kung for example, parang insolvency corporation, meaning to say, negative yung kanyang asset, wala na siyang pangbayad ng utang, then wala na magagawa yung creditors. Hindi nila mahahabol yung mga stockholders, no? Unlike for partnership, mahahabol nila yung mga partners, no, from their personal savings or personal accounts, okay? So, a corporation has a personality separate and distinct from its members. It has a personality separate and distinct from the persons composing it, as well as from that any other entity to which it may be related. A corporation has a personality separate. Ayan, the properties of the corporation are not the properties of its shareholders, members, or officers. The interest of the shareholder in the corporation is merely inchoate, no? And the obligations of the corporation are not the obligations of its shareholders and members and officers, and vice versa. Now, let's proceed to this doctrine of piercing the veil of corporate fiction. Actually, this is an exception to the rule on doctrine of separate juridical personality. Generally, sabi natin, yung stockholders daw tsaka yung corporation, separate yung kanilang personality. Yung assets ng corporation sa corporation lang. Yung assets ng stockholders sa stockholders lang din. Yung liabilities ng corporation, liabilities lang din ng corporation. At hindi pwedeng maging personal liabilities ng mga stockholders. However, kapag merong fraud, kapag merong abuse, or misuse of corporate powers, dito nag-a-attach yung doctrine of piercing the veil of corporate fiction. Meaning to say, hindi mag-a-apply yung general rule. Ipi-pierce ng batas yung veil of corporate fiction. Ano natin i-explain natin ng mabuti na maintindihan natin. Kumbaga, kunyari, merong itong baso ko ng corporation ito. Tapos, meron akong veil na parang binalot dito, no, para walang makapasok. So, meaning to say, separate talaga siya, no? Separate talaga itong baso. So, ngayon, ang mangyayari kapag mag-apply itong doctrine of piercing the veil of corporate fiction, ipi-pierce ko siya. Meaning, parang gisiyon ba kanang i-pierce mo or laksiyon or ganyan ba para ma-open siya. So, hindi na siya immune, no, from liability. Like, pwede nang i-consider ng law na yung corporation tsaka yung stockholder, iisang tao na lang sila. Okay? Wala na yung separate juridical personality. Kapag merong abuse, merong fraud, merong mga irregularities, no? Meaning to say, ginamit nila yung corporation for like illegal purpose. So sabi ng batas, dahil merong abuse, ipipierce natin yung corporate fiction, veil of corporate fiction, hindi na mag-a-apply yung separate juridical personality. So anong effect nun? Ang effect nun, yung liability ngayon ng corporation, magiging liability na, personal liability na ng mga stockholders. Anong basic example nito? Like, para maka-evade ng obligation to pay the salary of the employees. So, ginagawa ng iba, dinidissolve nila yung corporation, tapos nagka-create sila ng bagong corporation, pero the same lang din naman yung mga board of directors, yung mga stockholders. Ang naiba lang, nag-change sila ng mga employees, no, para ma-evade nila yung liability nila for salaries. So kapag ma-prove na talagang wala namang nagbago, meron lang circumvention ng batas, no, para makatakas sila sa kanilang mga obligation. So ang gagawin ng batas natin, i-connect sila, no? Parang parang isa lang sila. So meaning to say, hindi makakawala yung corporation kahit na nagbago yung corporation. Tsaka yung mga stockholders, tsaka yung mga board of directors, magiging personally liable sila sa kanilang sa obligation ng corporation kasi nga merong abuse, merong fraud. So ganon. So ipipierce natin yung veil of corporate fiction. So the corporation will be treated by the courts as a mere aggregation of persons, and the liability will directly attach to the persons composing the corporation. Okay? So, instances when corporate personality may be disregarded, ito, when the corporate identity is used to defeat public convenience, justify wrong, protect fraud, or defend crime. Okay? Fraud cases. Okay? Where the corporation, example nito yung mga investment scam, di ba? Like, gumawa sila ng corporation, no, para to appear, no, na isa silang legitimate na corporation. Pero yun pala, yung mga transactions nila are fraud, no, are a fraud. So, ang mangyayari, hindi, di ba, generally, hindi magiging personally liable yung mga members or directors or stockholders. Kasi meron tayong separate juridical personality. Pero in that case, kasi merong fraud, ginamit yung corporation, gumawa lang sila ng corporation para makakollect ng money from the people, pero yun pala, hindi pala yun legitimate, para lang as if merong corporation. So ang gagawin ng batas, hahabulin nila yung mga tao na gumawa ng corporation, hindi yung corporation mismo. I-disregard nila yung corporation. Kasi the law will treat them as one. So maging liable ngayon personally yung mga stockholders or the directors. Where the corporation is a mere alter ego or a business conduit of a person. alter ego cases, where the corporation is so organized and controlled and its affairs are so conducted as to make it merely an instrumentality, agency, conduit, or adjunct of another corporation. Yung na-mention natin kanina, no, na meron silang another corporation. Okay? Ito, limited liability rule na mention na natin kanina. Ito, nationality of a corporation. How to determine? We use aggregate or control test. Requires looking into the nationality, domicile, or residence of the individuals who control the corporation. So, meaning to say, kung sino-sino daw yung directors ng corporation or stockholders ng corporation. Kung Pinoy sila, majority, then it is a Filipino corporation. Pero kung mixed siya, merong foreigners, i-identify natin kung sino yung mas marami. More than 50%, yung may control, okay? But the other test is the entity test or place of incorporation test, no? It doesn't matter kung sino yung nagko-compose ng corporation. What matters here, kung saan na-incorporate, kung saang lugar. Kung sa Pilipinas, then that is a domestic corporation. Kung sa ibang bansa, then that is a foreign corporation. Now, to determine kung mixed yung membership ng corporation, paano ba i-determine yung nationality? Ginagamit nila itong grandfather rule, no? This applies if the share of Filipinos in a shareholder corporation is less than 60%. Now, let's go to classes of corporation. We have stock corporation and non-stock corporation. Kapag stock corporation, meaning to say, merong capital stock divided into shares and are authorized to distribute to the stockholders of such shares, dividends or allotments. Non-stock naman, kapag wala kayong capital stock divided into shares, then ang tawag sa inyo, non-stock corporation. Capital structure, meron tayong tatlo. We have authorized capital stock. So itong authorized capital stock, makikita natin ito sa Articles of Incorporation. Ito yung amount fixed or the number of shares lang na pwedeng i-issue ng corporation. Kaya nga ang tawag natin dyan, authorized. Meaning to say, that is the number or the value of capital stock that the corporation is authorized to issue. Now, subscribed capital, ito yung portion ng authorized capital stock na subscribe na, meaning nabili na ng mga stockholders. While paid up capital, ito yung portion ng subscribed capital na nabayaran na. Okay? Outstanding capital stock refers to the total shares of stock issued to subscribers, whether or not fully or partially paid. Okay? Except treasury shares. So this is more on parang accounting side, no? Stock corporation shall not be required to have a minimum capital stock except as otherwise specifically provided by special law. Okay? So wala tayong minimum capital stock, no, for stock corporation. And take note that one of the amendments, no, introduced by the new law is wala na yung 25% of the subscribed must be paid, wala nang ganon. Or 25% of the authorized capital stock must be subscribed. So, wala na tayong minimum requirement. Now, let's go to classification of shares. So, the shares in stock corporations may be divided into classes or series of shares or both. So, each share shall be equal in all respects to every other share. So, equal lang yun, no? Except as otherwise provided the articles of incorporation or certificate of stock. So this is doctrine of equality of shares. So kung meron kang 10 shares at meron din akong 10 shares, then equal lang yung rights natin in the corporation. Generally, no share may be deprived of voting rights. No? So lahat ng shares may voting rights. Except lang kung ang share is classified as preferred or redeemable shares. So pwede siyang i-deprive ng voting rights, no? Unless otherwise provided in the scope. So these are the instances na allowed yung mga preferred tsaka redeemable shares to vote, no? In cases of amendment of the Articles of Incorporation, so kung meron kayong amendment like yung authorized capital stock, gusto nyo i-increase yung amount kasi pwede naman yun. So yung mga preferred shareholders, they have the right to vote, no, for the amendment. Adoption and amendment of bylaws, sale, lease, exchange, mortgage, pledge, or other disposition of all or substantially all of the corporate property. Kasi this is no longer an operational transaction, no? Kasi nga, imagine you will dispose all or substantially all of the corporate property. So it requires the vote of all members, no, all stockholders. Incurring, creating, or increasing banded indebtedness because you are imposing burden to the corporation, and isa yan sa mga interest, no, ng mga preferred shareholders. Increase or decrease of capital stock kasi maapektuhan yung kanilang interest in the corporation. Merger or consolidation of the corporation with another corporation because this is a huge transaction, no? Parang i-merge or i-consolidate nila yung dalawang corporation, maapektuhan yung kanilang shareholding. Investment of corporate funds in another corporation, and of course, the dissolution of the corporation. Kailangan yung kanilang vote. So, na-mention natin earlier yung preferred shares. Ano ba itong preferred shares? Preferred ang tawag sa kanila kasi meron silang preference sa distribution of assets. Meaning to say, nauuna sila sa pagdidistribute ng assets in case of liquidation and in the distribution of dividends, no? Bakit ganun, no? Kasi preferred sila, di ba? Ano pa lang meron, no? Kasi wala naman silang right to vote. Wala silang right to vote para mamili kung sino yung magko-control ng corporation. So, preferred lang sila in the distribution of assets and dividends. Whereas yung mga voting shares, ordinary shares, dahil meron silang right to vote, so meron silang control sa operation ng corporation. That is, malaking part yan kasi may control ka. Unlike preferred shareholders, wala silang control, no? Kung net loss yung corporation, di wala silang magagawa. Now, redeemable shares, shares that may be purchased or taken up by the corporation upon the expiration of a fixed period regardless of the existence. Okay? Meaning lang yan is, mariredeem mo yung shares. Mariredeem yan ng corporation. Par value shares, ito yung mga shares na may value under the Articles of Incorporation. No par value, edi walang par value. Founder share, ito yung shares ng mga founders ng corporation, parang privilege nila, no, in founding the corporation. Treasury shares are shares of stock which have been issued and fully paid for but subsequently reacquired, no? Either by purchase, redemption, donation, or through some other lawful means. Ito yung nabenta na ng corporation pero ni-reacquire ng corporation. So ito yung treasury shares. Okay, that ends our discussion, no, for basic concepts of corporation. So see you again, no, sa next natin na video for pre-review class for corporation law. Thank you very much for listening. And if you have questions, kindly raise your questions in the comment box below.